What's up, everybody? This is episode 91, and today we're answering the question, why does God even care? Now, this question comes from an atheist. I was on a Reddit thread, and I was looking at the reasons why some skeptics aren't Christians, and it was because of these quote-unquote like tough questions that led them to unbelief. And funny enough, this question that I'm about to read actually gives me hope. And I was reading it and I'm like, this is a tough question for you. Not to be like, oh, I'm better than you, but this actually is the reason why I'm blown away. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
And you guys, you'll get what I'm saying when I say that. It's interesting. They come at it. You can see the way they're trying to go down the road they're trying to go down, like in a negative aspect, attributing blame against God. But this is actually the reason why I think we can have incredible hope.
What's the question but what's the overarching question before you read it?
Yeah, it's basically, the reason, like, how come God cares? So why does God care that I sleep with my girlfriend? Why does God care and so invested in our affairs? Basically, does he have anything better to do?
Wow, what a profound question.
Yeah.
I don't know if that could be answered.
I don't think so either. Maybe we should just wrap up the podcast.
Now. Move on. It just amazes me, some of these questions that seem so profound on these platforms where you find them and they're like, whoa, dude, some of these people need to stop smoking pot and get back to a logical discussion about this, because the reality is that is not profound at all. I mean, we can look at our own parents and why doesn't my parents let me play in the highway? I really want to ride my bike down 94, dude, it's very simple answer.
Yeah.
And maybe when you become a parent, then you will then it'll make sense to you why you don't let your 3-year-old ride his trike down I-94.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Some of these things, just because you don't see the danger of it, you haven't lived long enough.
Yeah.
God is the Alpha and Omega, and not, hey, by the way, buddy, he created you.
Yeah.
And for moms and dads, and we're kind of setting this up for moms and dads who have children, there's that sense, although you're not the creator, you put that you created that kid.
Yeah.
And that love for that child is enduring, and you want to protect the child when they don't have the sense to protect themselves.
Exactly.
So, and that's only part of it. The reason I'm bringing it up now is because we're going to take another direction after you read this. But man, it's just insane to me how insane some of these questions are.
It's like, the reason, so I'll only be obedient if it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
If I had that approach growing up, man, I would have the belt. Maybe that's not PC, politically correct anymore, but I can think, I'm like looking back and so embarrassed the way that I acted towards my parents. I was very stubborn and rebellious, and I just was like, it doesn't make sense to me, or I thought I knew better. And it's funny because I'm like, man, God, I don't know, the patience on another level. Like I appreciate and respect my parents now being on the other side of the fence. And I'm like, thank you for putting up with me. And I said things out of ignorance thinking I knew better, but now I'm on the other side. I'm like, I'd parent my kids the same way. And I can't even imagine 10x, even more than that, how God looks at us. And we're like, well, I'm not going to do it unless I understand it. Explain to me right in the sky why I should just obey you. It has to make sense before I'm obedient.
Well, and some of these people talk about God or to God like we used to talk to our parents as teenage brats.
Yeah.
And, like I would never do that with my kids.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm never going to do that.
Exactly.
I'm never going to make them stay home for a dance. We weren't allowed to go to dances when I grew up. I'm never going to do that with my kids. I'm going to let them do. And it just shows the immaturity that people have and the ignorance that they have as well. And some of those people should, the Bible's got a verse that says it's better you keep your mouth shut and for people not to know you're ignorant than to open your mouth and to tell everybody what you really
leave
are.
no doubt.
Yeah, leave no doubt of it.
That's such a good point. I like that's such a good analogy. We're definitely clipping that one because it is. We do talk to God like the teenagers talk to their parents. I cannot believe, and they're still blaming their parents today. The reason why they are the way they are, they still are making excuses. Well, I'm not going to ever be like my dad. I'm never going to be like my mom. And those are fallible human beings. Obviously, our parents aren't perfect, but it is that same rebellious approach to God. Well, how could a loving father send his kids to hell? If I were God, I would never do that. I literally just had a conversation with a guy and I'm like, whoa. If we're going to get in theoreticals, but are you God?
Yeah.
He's like, well, are you God?
Right.
No. So what are you going to do about it if you don't like it?
Right. Well, and you get these like a teenager, like all the other gods let their people do this.
I wonder why.
Yeah. It is really, truly amazing. It reminds me of a story when we were on the beach in St. Joe, Michigan. We used to live there, and we were on the beach one Friday, and it was in the summer, and it's just beautiful beaches in St. Joe. Shout out to St. Joe, Michigan, Silver Beach. The sugar it's like sugar sand, and we would go there on Fridays. And we're sitting there with the kids. Our kids were small at the time, and they're playing in the water. And these teenagers just parked themselves right in front of us. Yeah. We had this great view, and they parked themselves, about 8 of them. And they started talking about a party that was going on that night, and we're kind of eavesdropping on them because they parked themselves right in front of us. That's what they get. And one of the girls goes, well, my grandpa's not going to let me go. And they're like, oh, your grandpa's so old-fashioned. He doesn't know anything. And she's like, I know and she starts bashing her grandpa, who probably didn't want to have to be the guy raising her at that moment. Yeah. But if he's going to do it, he's going to protect her. Wow. And I'm getting more and more furious inside of me because now I'm a parent. I see this, and I see the ignorance of these friends trying to convince this girl that her blessing is a curse. And which you need to remember that. Yeah. And what happened was all of those people left, but she stayed. And I thought, this is a God thing. 7 of them left. She didn't go with them. They all went to get something to eat, but she stayed. And I go, young lady, and my wife's like, oh, James, like, we're at the beach, right? I'm like, this is a divine appointment. I said, I know what your friends are telling you. And then I told her, basically her grandfather's a blessing, and she needed to recognize that no matter what they said, she's protecting her, and that one day in her life she will look back in her life and see the blessing of her grandfather, and how these friends she thought were friends were actually trying to get her to stumble and to fall into things she didn't want as part of her life. And then all the friends returned, and I had stopped just before they got back. But then she told her friends what I said, so they all got up and moved. And I'm like, hey, I got the best of both worlds. She heard the word, and then they all moved out of our view, so we got our view back of the water. Yeah. But I don't care what she told her friends. My voice was the Holy Spirit in her life, and they will be rehearsed in her mind even through that. I knew they would be because it was a divine appointment in that moment. And I think when we come to the place of realizing, and you're going to hear this question, we'll talk about it more, it's really based on your view of God. Yeah. How you view God. If you view God as being someone who created the rules and then needed people to follow them, yeah, then you're going to view it. That's basically what you're viewing, is he really loves the rules, and then he needed people to honor his rules, rather than the other way around, that he created and loves us and then gave us guidelines that let us know, hey, you're going off the road and this will destroy you.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of, before I get into the question, because I just had a funny thought. I think how, in the perspective of someone that doesn't really like God, or they have this weird association with who he is and his character. I'm thinking of, I remember in school, if homework was due, you get to this class and class was winding down and the teacher forgot to collect the homework.
Yeah, I remember.
And you'd always have that one kid, bell's about to ring 5 minutes, don't say anything, and they raise their hand. Teacher, Actually, you forgot to collect the homework.
And everybody wants to beat him up after class.
Are you serious, dude? Like, I feel like that's what people think of God, like, the rules, like, and he's that guy.
Yeah.
Because I'm remembering, I always bring this up. I remember how I used to view God. That was him. Like, no fun. Sin was fun. He was the buzzkill, the party pooper.
Well, I think a lot of people think of God as the one who's trying to keep people out of heaven.
Exactly.
We got to keep the riffraff out of heaven, which would, if that were the case, there wouldn't be anybody going to heaven.
He wouldn't have never stepped down from glory.
Right. He had to come to get people in.
Yeah.
And because the object of his love, which are people, created in his image. Why does he care? It's because we're his image.
Yeah.
We're created by him for his image. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his son." You can't change your love for something. Yeah. Love is not something he felt because of. I think when you think of love as being what you get from it, so you love it.
Yeah, true.
So I love Cane's because I get good chicken fingers from Cane's, or I love my spouse because of what they do for me.
Yeah.
I'm attracted to them. I think they're beautiful, and so I get something from that transaction. When you think of love in that way, then you wonder this question is asked. So then what if there's nothing good in me? Why does he care? Why does he care about me? Because he can't divorce himself from his love he has for you. Like God, it was for God that he sent his son into the world because he loved man that much.
Yeah.
He loves man that much that he wanted relationship for man. And which, brings us to the point of, if you don't want relationship with God, there's a place for you.
Yeah. And
that place will be void of God, and it will have the fullness of the presence of someone you may not enjoy all that much. The one who's leading you astray. The one that's
letting you do all those things.
Yeah, the one's like, oh, that's cool, dude, no problem.
Play in the highway.
Right, go ahead. If it destroys your life, I'm all for it. I'll be singing praises for the destruction of your life.
Yeah.
He came to kill, steal, and destroy.
Yeah.
And really is the reason why Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, because of the deception that and so if you're listening to this and you think we're off our rockers, listen, he's such a good liar. And when you believe a lie, you don't even know you're believing a lie. You have to look at the fruit of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the question that we'll get into, that the person thought was so profound, and they haven't had apparently anybody being able to answer this. This is why it's important for you to go to church and talk to Christians, not just live off of a piggybacked experience online. Like, you need to, it's okay to have these questions, but you got to vent them in the right location. What does an omniscient, infinitely powerful being need with any of this? Anything human at all? Why would such a being care about whom we do or do not pray to, or whom we sleep with, or whether we covet anything belonging to our neighbor, or who will be the U.S. president? Why would such a being require sacrifices? And why would such a being be jealous of anything humans do at all? I've never had a plausible answer to any of these, and more.
Yeah, I kind of chuckle because mixed in that, peppered in all of those things, he says, why would they care what U.S. oh my. It's part of the problem with the church is we've crossed over and set up this identity as if God's for any of the presidents. Yeah. I think the reality is we elect who we are. So let's just deal with that one point, because the rest of them is a little different. As a nation, we elect who we are. Yeah. And Christians don't like what we've become as a nation because of the moral positions we've taken. On all of the other things that are there, you look at who you sleep with, who you pray with. Listen, you don't exist if God doesn't create you.
Exactly.
God created, it's very fundamental. God created you to have relationship with you. That's our purpose.
Yeah.
He wants your heart. The only thing God doesn't have is your heart. And he gave you a free will to choose whether you give him your heart or not.
Yeah.
He's not a dictator. He doesn't want to destroy you.
Yeah.
What we've made this is religion. Religion has made relationship with God all about rules. And we got
sent the ravens.
Yeah, the ravens came in.
Pastor McKenzie.
So we got a little bit of coffee here to keep you going.
Yeah.
You know, you're a young man, you get sleepy fast. But God created us for relationship to love us, and his love for us says, hey, these are the things that the enemy is going to try to do in your life to destroy your life. I want to guard you so that you can have abundant life.
Yeah.
And when you live this way, the fruit of this kind of life will be produced. Listen, if you're watching this, I'm looking right at you, and you're sleeping with just anybody and everybody, let me tell you, there will be a time in your life when you meet somebody that you really feel is the woman or the man for your life, but you'll have given yourself to all of these other things, and sex will not be special because you'll have given it to everyone else. My wife and I were both virgins when we got married because we recognized that the one thing we wanted to give each other was sex. And there was plenty of opportunities, and we have all the same libidos that everyone else has. But when you want to hold a gift and give it to the person you're going to marry, it's amazing how that gift of that, it becomes more special in the relationship because you just didn't give it out to everyone else.
Yeah. Like people, like that's one of the things that I've heard. They're like, well, but because we talked about, you know, if I don't comprehend it, I'm not going to be obedient to it. So I think I'm going to bring comprehension to a topic, to bring understanding, to show that God's law is good and what he talks about is true and it works for our life. Like the law and his really, I think a better way to talk about it is like a manual to life and blessing is a better way to look at it rather than a buzzkill and keep us from fun. This is a way that we could be blessed.
Well, the Bible says they're words of life.
Yeah, exactly. So in the topic, I've had people tell me, well, what is why does God care about who I sleep with? Like we said, like that's a big issue for people. People like wonder, like, why does he care about it? How does it give me a logical answer of, you know, apart from the Bible, just logically of why I should wait until I'm married? And I think you just did a great job at that, which people don't really understand. Like, why did God give like sex? It was for intimacy. And then if you go around and you reduce sex nothing more to a handshake with people and it becomes a holy thing, becomes common, then that thing meant to produce intimacy produces shame and this wedge between you and your partner.
And what's interesting, it does create a physical bond with a person. So even when you're dating, if you start to have sex, all of the signs of issues that will come in your marriage in the future, you'll ignore. Because sex will cause you to have this emotional bond, a physical bond with this person. And in the dating relationship, that's not the time for the bond to take place. We go on 2 dates and then have sex. Or I love this. This shows how passive we feel about sex in our culture, especially because of how much of it occurs on television. It's just common. Expected and commonplace. Is people will say, well, you don't buy a pair of shoes until you try them on. I mean, if it's marriage is like sex is not relationship. It's the kind of the fruit of it. It's something that you bond when you have sex. You don't need to have sex to know if you're going to have a relationship. I would argue that if you try it on, you'll ignore all of those things that will in the future become issues in your marriage. Now, does that happen all of the time? Come on, millennials. No, it doesn't. Is there times where that's not the case? Of course. Have there been times where people have had sex? Of course. But everybody's going to think that's them. Yeah. Well, I'm the exception to the rule. And I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions of marriage counseling. And they all would come back to the place of, especially in premarital counseling, where it is obvious they should not get married. And I'll ask them, "Are you having sex?" And they're like, "No," because I'm the pastor, and I'm like, "You guys are completely ignoring the reality, these are real issues in your relationship that won't get fixed by getting married. And you're having sex. I said, I believe you're having sex and you're lying to me. And I've said that. If you know me, you know I'm going to say that because you're ignoring them. You're because you made a bond before you were ready for it, before there was a covenant with you.
Yeah.
And covenant is sealed with sex. It's why it was called consummation. After you made a covenant, then they went in the tent and they sealed it with sex. It's just it's an incredible thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But when you make it so common among man and woman, then it's so common, and so it can be with any of your friends.
Yeah.
And now people view it as being something that was in the Bible, and David and Jonathan just had physical relationships because their brain can't see it as any more sacred than a handshake, like you said.
Like, can you imagine if, well, maybe some people, there is exceptions that people don't care what you wear to your wedding or how you treat your wedding, or let's just, let's just get married Friday or whatever. Let's just set something up, and then I'll just wear my jeans. I'll wear my comment, and I'll put some effort into. Can you imagine understand that? Weddings for people it's huge. It's a huge deal. Why? Because it's hopefully something happens once in your lifetime. It's not common. It's not like another regular get together or just another date that you have with your spouse. It's a day that you are committing and set aside from the rest of the calendar year. Can you, in the same way, people wonder, well, why is it such a big deal? It's because you're making what is holy, what is sacred, you're making it common.
Right.
I want to keep repeating that because people, hopefully this clicks for them, nothing more than just a handshake. It's not special, and God intended it to be special, and only to be intimate with a partner or a marital relationship, a covenant.
So this person makes a comment and says, I've never had an explanation. Well, have you talked to any Christians? I mean, God, the reality of this is God created you. He created you to love you. Mm-hmm. So he cares.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, it's I might not know. The thing, if I ever was mad at my parents and I didn't understand why they were making me do something, I never questioned if they loved me or not. That was nothing that came into my head. The relationship I had to my parents, no matter how stubborn or arrogant I was, if they asked me to do something, I wasn't assuming that I might have said, you don't love me or whatever. I don't think I ever went that far. I know that sometimes people pull out to leverage against their parents, but I knew that my parents loved me. And just because you don't comprehend something, what I can have assurance in, and when I'm talking to people that are far smarter than me online, I'm like, that's a great question. That's a great question that you can use as an excuse. For me, I'm not going to use it as an excuse. Why? I don't have the answer to that question. I'll go back and I'll talk to God about it if that's something that's hindering you from a relationship with him. But it's not something that's going to hinder me from seeing God as good, because I don't worship God because I understand all of his actions, but I know his motive, which is love.
Yeah.
And so people get caught up with, if I don't comprehend it, I'm not going to be obedient to it. That's not how this. That's not how this works.
Right. Well, and what's interesting, this week we're in a 7 series, and when people watch this or listen to this, it may be at a different time of the year, but we're in the middle of a campaign that we're doing for small groups called 7. And the Church of Ephesus, if you read this in Revelation chapter 2, there's a statement to the Nicolaitans, and in that statement, it was this belief that's been around for thousands of years, a couple thousand years, is that if you're a follower of God, then you can do whatever you feel you want to do is okay with God. And that's, if this person is saying, well, I would believe in God if he just let me do whatever I felt we could do. It was almost like the belief and theology of the Nicolaitans was to somehow trying to reach. It was with good intention. This person who says, you just go ahead, do whatever you want to do. It's okay. No problems. God doesn't care. And continue on with all of that stuff with no regard to what it's doing for you. And in believing God though.
Yeah.
And they said they resisted the angel of the Lord. Christ says, you resisted the teaching of the Nicolaitans.
Yeah, the compromise is a big thing, and especially that we see in our culture. The first point that I wanted to address, as far as breaking this piece by piece, is the fundamental thing that we slightly covered, and it's a common misconception behind most of the questions that I see, like online, and and this is how I would respond to most questions. Why? It's his world. We're just living in it. If he doesn't want, if it's his house and he asks you, hey, I'd appreciate if you leave your shoes at the door. You do that because you're a guest in his home. It's his world. That assumption of why is God affiliated, like why is God so invested in our affairs, as if we could exist autonomously from his existence. Like this is his creation. Yeah. You understand that he placed you in his, all of this is his, the universe is his, the breath in your lungs is his. They act as if like there's a possibility for them to exist outside of him.
It's but teenagers don't care if it's your house.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another great point. It is like more and more we break it down. It's like a bratty teenager that is beefing with their parents.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to do what I want to do. Yeah, it's true. I think what I like better is he is God. He is our king. He is the king of the world for sure. And Christ has the keys of all authority. Mm-hmm. But the reason he cares is because of his love. God is the pure definition of what love is. Yeah. And he gave us authority of the world. We couldn't handle it. Adam and Eve gave that to the kingdom of the air, and Satan. And that's the battle that's taking place right now on the planet. Mm-hmm. But we have authority. Christ regained that, gave us that authority on the planet. And we walk in that. But it's just, if you're an atheist, you don't believe in God.
Yeah. There's a couple things we got to walk back, because I feel like there's no true atheist, because the moment an atheist even gets in an argument with us, they prove they're not an atheist, because truth is immaterial. And if they supposedly don't believe in an immaterial world, well, you even engaging in an argument with me shows that you do, because truth is immaterial.
Yeah, you're trying to prove you're right when you can't be right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's your own truth, but they want to prove all of the Christian truth wrong.
It's funny.
It's amazing. A pure atheist says at the core, there is no soul. Yeah. You're just a body. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah. So your brain works like your dog or your cow or your horse. Mm-hmm. That's essentially, there's just no soul.
Yeah. And this is always what I reiterate, because I'm not trying to bully atheists. I'm attacking the mindset that's keeping you from truth and true love. Because if Christian is considered hate speech in what we preach, I don't understand how the same doesn't apply for an atheist. I'm nothing more than a monkey. And I'm an accident and nothing more than instinct. Like, you're telling me that a God who created you, that I preach, who loves you, who paid for your sins, that's hateful, but what you say is not.
The problem is the unbeliever doesn't see the difference between religion and a relationship with God.
True.
They don't decipher between the difference. So whenever they talk about Christianity, they always refer to the actions of religious people.
Yep.
Rarely are they pointing to people who are living in relationship with Christ, who care about them, love them in spite of their disagreements.
So you remember, we've talked about this before. I actually had a video that I reacted to. You remember that African-American lady that was saying, if God says jealousy is a sin, but yet in the Bible it says that he's like a jealous God. And it was like she was making like a gotcha moment and was saying that God actually is this.
2 different Greek words, by the way.
Yeah.
So we only have one word to describe 2 different Greek words. So she's ignorant in the fact, and ignorant doesn't mean you're stupid. Ignorant means you just don't know.
You lack understanding.
You're taking English words in the Bible and you're comparing the two when they're 2 separate Greek words. The Bible is written in Greek. Greek has way more words in it than the English language. So like love has 5 different Greek words that are all interpreted into love. So is jealous.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that, and I actually got this answer off. If you want a great resource, and if you're someone who has like a ton of questions like me, look up gotquestions.org. I think they're almost at 1 million answered questions.
That's
like
amazing.
Anything that you can think of, and they'll provide Bible verses, and they have like even videos paired with these questions. And so a lot of times, like I don't have the answers that I can just pull out like readily available. So I'm always like looking up stuff because I'm like, oh, that's an interesting question. Let's look it up. And this one I got from Got Questions, and you can look it up. Why does it say God is jealous? But it says it's a sin to be jealous. And I love how he gives this analogy of jealousy is only wrong when you covet something that doesn't belong to you. Jealousy, when we understand as far as God, he gives this analogy talking about a husband and a wife. He goes, if a husband catches his wife cheating on him, finds out she's cheating, is it right for his husband, for her husband to be jealous?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they have a covenant. They have it's a relationship that's his wife, and he is righteous and right in being jealous because
the covenant gives ownership to him of the love she's giving to someone else.
Exactly. It's not deserved. The love that it was supposed to be sacred, she's making common. We're bringing it back again with other men and going around with other men in the same way that God and worship that we give to other gods, that we give to statues. We're going through Bible in a year, and we're hearing that a lot. You're giving your worship to these gods that don't speak, that don't have a mind.
Right.
God is deserving of our worship. If he's given us the breath in our lungs, if he is responsible for all of creation, and because he created it, everything we have is owed to him. He is deserving of it all. And what an atrocity that we would do something as heinous as giving credit to a little cute statue we made in the image of man or creepy crawly things on the ground, rather than giving it to this invisible God.
You make a great point. What are the effects of this question of why does God care?
Yeah.
Right? Those are comments that you make when you're part of a lawless culture.
Ooh, we're heading there.
And as much as people do not enjoy the laws of the land were created to bring common good. And even though the common good may not be for you because you broke the law in that moment, it was for everyone else around you. But when you tell people to throw off the laws, well, I don't care. I'm going to go rob department stores. I'm going to go take stuff out of that doesn't belong to me. And the police, I'm going to go steal a car, or I'm going to go in the moment, you get something you didn't deserve.
Yeah. True. That's so good. Yep.
But it affects the rest of the culture around you, the rest of the environment around you end up either leaving, and so it destroys what's going on, and then people around you says, well, if you're not going to be taken captive or put into have consequences for your actions, and everyone else is doing, then I'm not going to obey the law either. And a lawless culture, which is where you just see this, where now when people are held accountable to the law, and they're not, then more and more people begin to live in that lawless mindset, and we have chaos.
Yeah.
And so, like right now, they said, why does God care? Why does he? Because the laws are not only good for you, they're good for everyone around you.
Yes, exactly. And that's so funny because that's literally the next point that I had. That we were going to talk about. Like, why does he care about all these things that she just listed, or he or she just listed? Because he cares about justice and Don't you?
Yes.
I mean, we scream. There's other things that we're advocates of across the world, and it's to do with social justice, and we are advocates more so, I feel like, now than ever, that we've seen for all these different causes, whether political or in Palestine or for animals or for all these different things we've become advocates for, because we, like, in us, like, there's this justice, there's this need for justice. We want accountability to be had for those that are oppressors or breakers of the law. Wouldn't it be a terrible thing to live like the movie The Purge, where but instead of 24 hours, all law is legal, it's just lawless nonstop, and there's no one to enforce the law, and therefore people just do whatever they want. I don't think we can even comprehend what that world would look like, but it would be very terrible. I think you can appreciate our government and as much as people want to say they want to defund them, that we can appreciate those in law enforcement and our government that establish law and order so we can enjoy freedom, because the law is there to bless the rest of us. So we don't live in a lawless country where bad guys can do whatever they want.
Well, the reason so many people are coming to our nation is because of the lawlessness in other nations.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Venezuela and other places like that there's such lawlessness where gangs and cartels and all of that rule those areas. They don't want to live in places where the laws aren't for the common good of the environment. But this isn't a political podcast. Mm-hmm. The reality is when we get to become lawless people, as the Israelites were in the Old Testament, that it just brings chaos to the whole of the nation.
Yep, exactly. Like we should be glad that lawbreakers are put behind bars. So God is a loving God, but it's like people don't like the two. So when people say, how could a loving God send people to hell? It's like the two can't coexist. What he did to prevent people from going to hell, right? So he's a loving God, but he's also...
Again, for someone just listening to this podcast and another, God does not send anyone to hell, ever. You are already going to hell. Yep. You have been sentenced to hell from the time you were born. I'm sorry. But the loving God who created this universe sent his son to be a free gift of grace and to save you from that path to hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's a loving God, but he's also a righteous God. And he wouldn't be a righteous God if sin was allowed to go unpunished. And so I've heard this is not my thing.
I want a world without sin. I want to live in a world without sin.
We all do.
I want to have a heart. I want to have a pure heart. I want to have a heart that is fully committed to following Christ. And in the world to come, eternity is a place where sin is eradicated, where what was in the Garden of Eden before Eve listened to the serpent will be, I want to experience that. And according to the Bible, I'm going to experience that. According to Jesus, I'm going to experience that. According to the Apostle Paul, who had an encounter with Christ, I'm going to experience that. According to the Holy Spirit, that the Bible says clearly lives inside of the believer, I'm going to experience what the Garden of Eden was like before Eve sinned in the garden.
And for what was around the corner, all those people you mentioned lived not for the temporary pleasures of what this world could offer them, which was fleeting, but looked ahead to a better country. Right. Hebrews 11.
It's interesting. In the Garden of Eden, God didn't create rules and then created Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve were, created and God breathed into Adam, he didn't go, wow, what are all the rules? He didn't do that. God did not give them rules, except for one: don't eat of the tree in the middle of the garden, which had to be established in order for them to have free will. It's impossible to have free will if you don't have an option. You can't love if you don't have another option and that's all you have. You can't genuinely love God. But the option, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, is our decision on the planet. Just as Adam and Eve had the choice to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, you have a choice of whether you're going to eat of that tree right now. God has given you the ability to choose. Do you want the tree of life, which is Christ, and eat of the tree of life and be content with him, or eat in the tree of knowledge of good and evil and to think if you're good enough or if you're bad enough, or then I'm going to have a chance to get into heaven. It's the same. We have the same opportunity they did. And Christ gives us the ability when we humble ourselves. Christ gives us the ability to choose life every time.
So good. Like there is God's righteousness and God's love, they meet at the cross.
Yeah.
Where his righteousness means sin needs to be punished. He can't just sweep it under the rug. Like that's not how it works. He's not like, the Minnesota nice, like be nice to your face, talk behind your back, like or quick kick things under the rug because he doesn't like confrontation because he's insecure. He deals with sin on the cross, but his love is that he sent his son not to condemn the world, but to save the world through his death. That's the amazing thing of this whole thing. So it's not we think of God as he's either a loving God or he sends people to hell. No, you don't understand what the gospel is. That he sent his son to take accountability for your actions. Why this blood sacrifice? That's another thing people will say. Well, it sounds very culty that he needs a blood sacrifice. Well, sin equals death.
Why does it sound culty?
Because
cults use that same scenario. Satan always tries to emulate what God does.
Exactly.
Satan's creating a bizarro world to what God does. God has a son. Satan wants to have sons. Everything Satan did, he didn't create or come up with.
Copycat.
He copycats God. So the reason you think it's cultish is because the cult uses it. But why did they use it? Because they're trying to copy what God has done and established from the. If in order to understand why, you have to believe in God first. Mm-hmm. If you believe God created the world and he set all of the sun rising in the morning and dawning at night, if you believe all those things, then God has a reason for why it's the way that it is. Let me ask you a question, Alex. Mm-hmm. If you go into my garage and steal my bike, okay? Now my bike is in your garage. Whose bike is it?
Well, still yours.
But you're in possession of it. Right?
Yeah.
So if if Christ died on the cross and purchased your sin, he purchased your sin. You have a choice to bring to him what he's purchased and belongs to him, or to keep it in your garage. I have chosen that God has purchased the sin of my life, the iniquity of my life, the death in my life, and I have made the decision to give it to him and let him keep it. Yep. All of it, past, present, and future. But if you're someone that says, I don't want to give up my sin. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe what he did. I don't believe he purchased it. I don't believe what I'm doing is wrong. I don't even believe it's sin. I'm going to keep it as myself. Listen to me. Very, very closely. Listen to this. Christ is going to send your sin to the lake of fire. And if you refuse to let it go, it will be your sin that sends you to the lake of fire, not the Creator God. It will be your choice to hang on to something that never belonged to you. And he purchased it so that he could send the entirety of death, sin, sickness, and disease to the lake of fire. So in eternity, I don't ever have to deal with it again. That nobody in eternity has to deal with it again, that make their place in the new heaven and the new earth. And I am excited that he's doing that. But if you choose to hang on to it, you're going to go where your sin is going. Mm-hmm. And it's logical.
Yeah, it's crazy because we've talked about this previously. Like, it's so fun. Like in Ezekiel, you see it in the Old Testament because we think the Old Testament God is different from the New Testament God. In the Old Testament, God's like, do you think I delight in the death of the wicked? Turn and live.
Yeah.
And the punishment that happened to the Israelites was he was like, I'm causing you to drink what you have poured out, like the injustice that you have sown. Now you're going to reap. And me removing my hand, now it's going to all come on your head. And so you're going to reap all of what you've sown and all the sin that you've done. I am going to allow it to happen, and it's going to come on your head. In the same way, we think that, we forget, we remove ourselves out of accountability of what our sin produces, which is death. That is why sin requires death. Blood equals life. Jesus poured out his blood to cover us, put his righteousness over us, that if we turn from our wickedness and we believe, if we look up to that cross and we believe, we live.
Yeah.
And it's by faith, just to the choice we had in the Garden of Eden. There's death and life are before you.
Yeah.
What do you choose?
And the blood is life, really. Yeah. If your brain loses blood supply, it dies. Mm-hmm. If your hand loses blood, the flow of blood, it begins to die and rot on your body.
Yep.
And blood brings life to every extremity in your body.
Yeah. So there is, I want to mention this parable, and then we'll get into our last point.
Okay.
Because like I said, these questions that people are so like blown away by are actually for me, it produces hope for me. And someone that has a skeptical approach and has this issue with God, like a stubborn teenager, they always see the negative side. But I think the last point that we're going to give you after we talk about this parable, going back to the ownership and responsibility of God in the creation of the world, we'll end with something pretty interesting, that a different take on this question. So getting into it, we have this verse. It's Matthew 21. You know where I'm going with this? I meant to bring it up in our first point with God's ownership of the world, but I think this will paint a great picture in how Jesus refers to his responsibility over all creation, and versus what these tenants, these renters, did with that, and then rejected the author of life, the one who was responsible for all creation. And you have a pretty great example on. You want to tell me that example first, where you always bring up, if you go to the airport and I don't want to spoil it. You share it, because it'll lead nicely into this one. If I take you to the airport and you leave,
yeah. You want me to share it now?
Yeah.
Or you want to do the parable?
Yeah, I didn't want to. If I explained it all the way, then I would steal the.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So if I have a car, and it's a very nice car, my wife and I are going to the airport, and I think, well, you know what, Alex? I know you're having car issues right now, and you're riding your little bicycle to work every day. Drop us off at the airport. We're going to be gone for a month, and you can use my car. Sweet. And it would help you out, right? Yeah. So that happens. We'll be back in a month. We come back in a month. We just need you to pick me up from the airport.
No problem.
Sound good? And you get to use the car. So a month goes by, and we fly in, and sure enough, Alex is there with the car, and he picks us up. So he's driving, and as we're driving away, he says, "Oh, it's so good to have you back. I've really enjoyed, using the car, and I've been praying about this with Bailey, his wife, and we really felt led by the Holy Spirit that we should give you this car back." And I'm like, "What do you mean, give me the car?" And he's like, "Well, it was heavy on us that we should give you this car." I'm going to be like, "Dude, I own this car. You haven't been making payments. You didn't go out and buy this car. You didn't take care of it.
Bow on it.
Like, I let you borrow it. In the time of borrowing it, you somehow assumed you now own the thing. Just because you treat it like you own it doesn't mean you own it. Just because you are in possession of it doesn't mean you own it. Just because you may have put gas in it doesn't mean you own it. It's titled in my name, and I'll own it long beyond your existence."
Sheesh. So that leads nicely into this parable. Now you guys will get a picture. If you have trouble understanding the Bible, that really primes the pump for what we're going to talk about now. So Matthew 21, 1. Do you want to do the honors or do you want me?
Go ahead. You got a
Okay.
good scripture reading voice. Use your English accent voice.
Listen to another parable. There was a Latin. No, I'm not gonna do
That is terrible.
Maybe I could do James Earl Jones. Rest in peace. You saw he passed away, right?
Yeah, man.
Dang, that's my Darth Vader, bro. A legend. Shout out James Earl Jones. Okay. Listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a wine press in it, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. When the harvest time approached, he sent his servants to the tenants to collect his fruit. The tenants seized the servants. They beat one, killed another, and stoned a third. Jeez, these guys stink. Where am I at?
Verse 36.
Verse 36. There we are. Then he sent other servants to them, more than the first time, and the tenants treated them the same way. Last of all, he sent his son to them. They will respect my son, he said. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to each other, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and take his inheritance. So they took him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. How ticked would you be? You sent your own son and you...
Let's stop. Jesus is really kind of prophesying what would happen to him. So anyone who would say Jesus didn't know if he would die or not, didn't know the future, what was going to take place, Jesus is essentially prophetically speaking about what would take place, that he would be killed. But let's not make a mistake. This is still a parable. It's a story. We would be ticked, but God willingly sent his son because of his love for us.
Yeah.
That he did. In fact, Isaiah says that God took pleasure in, and this is hard for people,
It's trippy.
that God took pleasure in placing his son on the cross in order to gain us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to talk about how God is not just, like it says in Ezekiel, you need to reevaluate because I don't think you and God are the same with how he treats us. You would not do this. Okay, therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? You don't have to be a biblical scholar to wonder how this guy is going to act, finding out his own son they took advantage of and killed. He will bring those wretches to a wretched end, they replied. So this is what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And he will rent the vineyard to other tenants who will give him his share of the crop at harvest time. Jesus said to them, have you never read in the scriptures? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in his eyes. Therefore, I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. Anyone who falls on the stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom the stone falls will be crushed. Now, this is crazy because he's literally talking to these Pharisees that are soon to crucify him in a couple chapters.
And the Pharisees were the religious leaders of the day, and they were the ones leading the people. And it was they looked down on anyone who wasn't a religious leader. And the followers of Jesus were tax collectors, fishermen, commoners that would have been looked at by these religious leaders as being ignorant. In fact, there's this place in Scripture where it says they noticed that these people were not very educated, that were following, and yet they had incredible wisdom, and they were amazed by the insight and wisdom that they possessed. This verse right here, 43 and 44, is pretty incredible. It doesn't really flow in what we're talking about, but my dad used to tell me this. For those who don't know, my father was a pastor and was an evangelist for a while, but he used to always tell me this as a child growing up in 44, anyone who falls on the stone will be broken to pieces, but anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. And he used to say, James, if you're ever going to do anything great, you have to walk the road of brokenness, but you don't want the rock to fall on you because it will crush you. You want to fall on it. And there's a difference. Make the decision to fall on the rock rather than allow the rock to crush you and kill you. and in you. These religious leaders, he's even telling them, listen, because if you look up before, it says the cornerstone, what is the rock? The stone the builder rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this. It's marvelous in our eyes. So he's referring back to that. And he talks about given to people who will produce fruit. These religious leaders did not produce the fruit of the kingdom of God.
Though they were entrusted to be the shepherds of the people.
Right, but they weren't leading the sheep. They were using the sheep for their own gain rather than sacrificing their life for the sheep. And he says, anyone who falls on the stone, the cornerstone, who is that? Christ, will be broken to pieces. You'll fall on it. You'll be broken like a vessel where God flows through you. But it says anyone in whom it falls will be crushed. And so he's saying to these Pharisees, fall on me, fall on the truth. But like you've come here, but fall. Or this thing is going to fall on you and it's going to end you. And he's like, there's this cry like this. There's two options here.
Yeah. And what's their response? So it's like, Jesus is subtweeting them, not adding them. And they're like, when the chief priests and Pharisees heard Jesus's parables, they knew he was talking about them.
So what did they do?
They looked for a way to arrest him, but they were afraid of the crowd because the people held that he was a prophet.
And if you look at this, we're going in a way different direction, but these Pharisees were so anti-Christ that they wanted to make sure no one took his body out of the tomb. And it was so secure because they were going to put every precaution in place to keep the body from being stolen out of the tomb, that they put it there. And then when his body is gone and they know his body's gone and they didn't take it because every precaution was in place, they still denied a resurrected Christ. And
so
because
sad.
of what they would lose. They were so afraid of losing what they had in their position that they ignored what was obvious truth in front of them. And I think sometimes for people, especially the people asking these questions, they're so afraid of losing these addictions of sex and all of this stuff that they perceive religion says, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't, because their perception is religion is all the stuff you can't do.
Yeah.
That they don't ever take time to think, what do we gain?
Yeah.
Like, I gain a relationship with a living God who created the earth. That's what I gain. Yeah, I'm going to lose things that I know that have become part of my life, that have become my comfort, but it's way better. It's way better than that. And there were Pharisees that took heed to this and actually repented. Nicodemus being one, going to Jesus and saying, we know you're a great teacher. Tell me more.
What I love about, when he talks about how it was first the first servant, then it was another servant, and then it escalated to his son, where he comes to collect.
Right.
What's interesting, what is that mirroring? I love this in Hebrews, because when I think of that, I think of Hebrews, what the Hebrews author says. Sounds pretty familiar, huh? In past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. That's the escalation and the final revelation where he's not a prophet like Islam holds him to. He was more than that. It was his Son, and he's come to the tenant farmers to collect the harvest. But they killed him. But it didn't end there. He's resurrected. Pretty cool. Anyways, that's what I think when I see that passage.
Again, that's another incredible section of verses there in Hebrews chapter 1 that I love.
It's one of, I think it's top 3 books. But the last thing, and the thing that I want people to kind of ponder when you look at this, and you're led to, like, this person led to skepticism, which ended up them walking away. Like, people will assume that, well, Christians don't use critical thinking, that's why you're believers. No, I think critical thinking will lead you to believe.
Christians don't use critical thinking.
That's what I hear all the time.
Of course. There are Christians that don't use critical thinking.
Yeah.
But they didn't use critical thinking at any point in their life for anything. There are people who are more critical thought thinkers than others. There are people who are atheists that are not critical thinkers.
Yeah.
That is such an absurd statement to put everyone
You guys got them going.
in that position. It's like Christians are strange. Those people were strange before they became Christians. That's what's so great about this, is there's no, like, you're strange, you can't be a Christian.
Yeah.
They were strange before they became Christians. And when they became Christians, they just, that personality is just strange to you, or it's awkward to you. What about all the strange people who are atheists?
Yeah.
We can point out the absurd things people say that are atheists, or the absurd things people do that are atheists. Let's stop with all of that. There are critical thinkers that get into the scripture, they geek out on it, they have all of the truth, but in the end, this isn't about being a critical thinker.
Yeah.
This is about a relationship and discovering and experiencing God's love. So whether a Christian is a critical thinker or not, they've experienced something that has changed their life. It has affected their hearts. Their desires have been transformed. They may not have PhDs in critical thought, but they have experienced something that's changed their life. And there's probably been tons of critical thinkers throughout history. The Apostle Paul was a critical thinker. And in fact, if you watch John Lennox and many of the debates he has with other atheists, he almost always comes out of those debates, by most agreement of most people who are non-biased, winning the debate. He's a critical thinker. C.S. Lewis was a critical thinker. People would debate him. Atheists would they would actually could not disagree or combat the thought that he had. So, but if all of this is about critical thought, you will miss the experience that makes it real in the life of the true believer.
Yeah. So one of the arguments that they'll say, then we'll go into our next thing.
And one more thing. And don't talk to me about critical thought when somebody makes a question of, this is why I don't follow God, because why does he care? That is such a non-critical thinking
it's
statement.
Evidence-based, yeah.
It's easily answered.
Yeah.
It's like the whole thing when they say, well, this is a profound thing. If God's a good God, why does he let bad things happen to good people? That is not profound. That doesn't take critical thought to describe and explain.
Yeah, read the book of Job. That's ancient. One of all those books.
Yeah,
it's not a new thought.
There's just some things that people think it's just, come on, man. If you want critical thought, if you want to claim critical thought, then ask real questions.
Yeah. So the thing is they think that you can't be skeptical or critical and come out like as a Christian. That critical thinking is one of the mantras that leads you to unbelief, which is not true.
There have been books written by people who are atheists that went in to prove Christianity wrong.
Yeah.
And they came out proving that it was real and became followers of Christ.
Yeah. We have someone in our church actually named James. That's his story. He attends the Apple Valley campus just as of, I think, this year or 2 years, where him diving into this is actually, there is a lot more evidence than I thought. And now he believes and attends our Apple Valley campus. So, yeah.
I'm trying to think of the guy's name who is the news guy down in Chicago. And he the Case for Christ.
Oh, Lee Strobel.
Mm-hmm. Read The Case for Christ. If you're an atheist and you really do want to be non-biased, or if you're an atheist and you refuse to look at any evidence for Christ, you just don't want to believe in God. And that's a big part of this. You just don't want to believe in it. You don't want to give time to even looking at it. You went to college and some professor has literally deceived you and not given you all they do is give you their viewpoint. They don't ever give you the opposing viewpoint. Read the book, The Case for Christ, and you'll discover, wow, a lot of the questions you have, Lee Strobel had. Mm-hmm. And when he researched it and studied it, discovered, whoa, wait a minute. There is way more evidence for Christ and the reality of a God than I thought.
So the last point that I want to talk about is You gotta.
Well, but in the end, an argument isn't going to save you.
No.
This isn't about proving you wrong.
Yeah.
This is about you experiencing the creator of your life, to discover the purpose for which you were created, to discover identity, that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. You weren't an accident. You just didn't from an amoeba back, thousands, millions and billions of years ago, that it was intentional, that you were an intentional being.
Yeah. The question that produces hope for me is the fact that not why does God care? Why is he so closely, wanting to relate with creation is the very reason that blows my mind today and produces hope and gives my life meaning and purpose, is that God cares. And that the minuscule things that I do, the seen and the unseen things, he sees it all. And because he sees it all and judges, validates my meaning and my purpose for life. That things, I think sometimes people think of, things like Santa, like he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake, and he'll give you coal if you're not doing good. I think that it's not just in the negative way. Everybody thinks negative, but in the things that I'm working for righteousness' sake, and I'm following and serving him when it doesn't seem, and I'm doing good when it doesn't seem noticed, or I go unnoticed, or not saying me, but anybody that's listening to this, where you feel like you're like looked over, that God sees you, and you might be working for a boss or doing something that, isn't your dream job, but you do it if you're a Christian, and you do it as if you were serving the Lord. That God, the incredible thing that atheists and in the most commonly asked questions is, what is my identity? What is the purpose for my life? Like, what is the meaning of life? God validates and gives us that meaning and purpose by his intentionality with his creation. Like that's something that gives me incredible hope, is the fact that God cares, that he cares. And I'm not just floating in ambiguity, but I have a purpose and to do his will and have a relationship with him. And that's an incredible thing that gets me excited about every day, that I don't got to wake up depressed.
Yeah, right. Well, if you're an atheist, this is all there is.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the purpose?
There is no, it's about the purpose. There is a purpose.
Yeah.
It's doing every desire you have.
Exactly.
Getting whatever you can. You could care less about the future.
Hedonism. Yeah.
Because it's whatever pleases me in whatever way. And when everyone's living for themselves, you create a lawless society.
Yeah.
But when you believe, as I do, that there is an eternity, it's the question that I can't get away from, is what is life?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really do believe, and I've had some discussion on this, it's an assignment.
Yeah, that's good.
It's an assignment. And I think that assignment is different for everyone. But there's a lot of believers even who may be living, or you may be listening right now, and you're a believer and you believe all of this, but you're living this life as the world lives this life. You're trying to live it as if it's all there is, rather than living for something that's beyond this place. And I've been around the world. I've talked to pastors around the world, and they don't see this world as heaven. They don't see this world as being as good as what heaven will be.
Oh, yeah.
In America, we see this as being better than eternity.
That we're losing something.
That, okay, if I got to die, then I guess I'll go to heaven. I'd rather do that than go to hell.
Yeah.
But if I can live and learn longer, that'd be better.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's better that you go to heaven. Paul says to live is Christ, but it's better if I go into eternity.
It's a crazy thought.
Yeah.
Like that understanding. Like, you read Acts. We were required we're always required to read our Bible, but specifically Acts. And I'm going through it and I'm getting emotional reading it, because you read the beginning of Acts, but then you go into Paul's story, like Paul's life and his persecution and thrown back and forth between judicial systems and tossed between prison to prison. And he says what is my life? I regard as nothing, meaningless. I don't regard it as anything. And he's just being passed around, ridiculed, mistreated. And I'm sitting in my kitchen, what am I doing right now? What is my life? This is, do I have that same approach? I can say it, but do I truly believe that? Am I really living for eternity in the comfort of where I'm at right now. Like
Yeah.
it's challenging.
I think the question of our generation is defining or answering that question. What is life? James brings it up in the book of James. We went through this a few weeks ago, and I was doing a series through the book of James, and the question is asked just that way. What is life? And I think a lot of people are so captivated by what the world offers them. Like they've been taught that I got to go through all these steps and accomplish all of these things. And as you get older, you begin to realize it's all a myth. It's all lies. Like you get to the place where you accomplish all of those things and you're realizing, wow, I just wasted years of my life pursuing dreams that have no end, that really that aren't what God's called me to. And I don't want to die in regret, but I don't get another life to live. I don't get to like rewind it and live it differently. Yeah. And we dare not ignore the warnings of those who are lived beyond us. Yeah. You know, those, if you're in your 20s, listen to those in their 50s who are saying, I've done all those, I've pursued those things. Dude, you don't want to get to my age and look back and go, I lived like 20, 30 years for things that aren't even real. You want to live it for Christ. Yeah.
Those desires that are unquenchable here, and you think, just around the corner, then it'll be better. Just around the corner, then it'll be better. Just around the corner, understanding that you just made a full circle and then ended up still with nothing, with that same desire that can't be filled because you have eternity placed in your heart, and it's an eternity-sized chasm that nothing in this world can satisfy besides God. And he placed it there purposefully so you can ask that question, what is life? But that's meant to produce a desire in you to seek. And when you seek him, you'll find him.
Yeah, I believe that.
So hope this was beneficial for you guys. I like to attack these questions that really aren't that profound, that you can wrestle with doubt and come on the other end encouraged. So this question that was seemingly profound and they didn't have an answer to, actually is a question that gives me hope that he does care, that he is involved in our affairs. And thank God that he is, because it'd be a terrible life if he wasn't. So if you want to, make that decision today, if you're like, I don't know much about this, I want to start this relationship with God, or I want to make that decision today, you can reach out to me. I have it in the description online at bethelsrock.org, or you can email my personal email at pastoralex@bethelsrock.org. Leave us a comment. Let us know what your thoughts or observations were about this, or any questions that you have for a future topic that you'd like us to talk about. Or let me know a testimony. I would love to hear your guys' testimonies of how this episode or past episodes have impacted you guys. We always love getting your emails and hearing your feedback on this. I want to say thank you for listening to another episode. We're on 91. It's impressive. I know there's people that have been listening from the jump, so I appreciate you guys and your support. What you could do right now, if you want to help us, if you're new, is that if you're watching on YouTube, first, what you can do is you can like this video, you can share this with a friend, leave a comment. Then, if you don't want to miss out on any of the future content that we post here, hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. You can be first to the jump to hear any new episodes or content that we post. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you are, give us a rating. Giving us a rating by hitting those star button, preferably a 5. If you so choose, and if you think it's a 1, just don't leave leave a rating. But we'd appreciate that because it helps us get further out into the algorithm, and so more people can experience the truth. Wow, that wasn't even planned, but that was so good. And we'd really appreciate if you guys did that. Again, thank you for listening to another episode of Experience the Truth, episode 91. God bless you guys, and we will see you next Thursday.